America was built on the radical idea that you could criticize your government out loud, in public, without fear of punishment. It's what separated the founding fathers from kings and tyrants. When a government decides that certain words are too dangerous to be spoken, when it tells you what you can read, what you can write, and what you can think, history doesn't whisper, it screams. Every nation that silenced free speech thought it was protecting the people, but it always ended the same way: oppression, fear, and bloodshed. In this video, we'll uncover 10 powerful historical lessons to see exactly what happens when governments decide that speech is a privilege, not a right. Number 10, Mao's China. In 1966, Mao Zedong launched the Cultural Revolution, a campaign that would forever change China. It wasn't just political. It was a systematic attack on the human mind. Schools and universities were closed. Teachers, intellectuals, and anyone deemed a quote-unquote counter-revolutionary were publicly humiliated, beaten, or sent to labor camps. Books, art, and music that didn't fit the party's ideology were destroyed. Libraries were burned. Entire histories were rewritten. The Red Guards, mostly young students, became instruments of censorship and terror. Neighbors reported neighbors. Friends turned against friends. Even families were divided. Children encouraged to denounce their parents if they had quote-unquote bourgeois tendencies. People learned to fear not just the government, but their own minds. By silencing ideas, Mao silenced a generation. Creativity, innovation, and personal freedom were replaced by blind obedience and fear. Number 9, Nazi Germany. Germany in the 1930s was a nation in turmoil, economically devastated, humiliated by war, and desperate for direction. Into this chaos steps Adolf Hitler, promising national pride and order, but at the cost of truth and freedom. One of the first acts of the Nazi regime, controlling the narrative. Books that didn't align with Nazi ideology were burned in public squares. Writers, journalists, and intellectuals who criticized the government were silenced, imprisoned, or killed. Every film, every newspaper, every radio broadcast became a tool of propaganda. Dissenting voices were labeled enemies of the state, traitors, or un-German. Fear permeated every aspect of daily life. People stopped questioning because questioning could mean death. Nazi Germany is the starkest historical warning. When governments ban free speech, humanity pays the ultimate price. Number 8, Venezuela. In the early 2000s, Venezuela was one of the wealthiest nations in South America, rich in oil, culture, and freedom of speech. But that changed fast once the government decided that criticism was dangerous. Hugo Chavez, the self-proclaimed man of the people, started by attacking journalists who dared to question him. He labeled them traitors, tools of imperialism, and enemies of the revolution. Then came the laws. Vague new regulations that allowed the government to shut down TV networks that spread quote-unquote misinformation. Sound familiar? In 2007, Venezuela's oldest and most popular television channel, RCTV, was taken off the air simply because it criticized the president. Hundreds of independent radio stations were silenced. Newspapers were pressured, starved of paper supplies, or bought out by pro-government allies. By the time Nicolas Maduro took power, almost every major news outlet had been brought to heel. Reporters who refused to stay silent faced harassment, arrest, or worse. Ordinary citizens began censoring themselves, afraid that a single tweet could destroy their lives. Under the Maduro regime, Venezuela collapsed, not just economically, but morally. Once a beacon of prosperity, it became a nation where people literally ate from garbage cans, while the government blamed quote-unquote fake news for their suffering. Number 7, Italy under Mussolini. When Benito Mussolini rose to power in the 1920s, he understood something most dictators didn't. He didn't need to silence every journalist. He just needed them to speak his words. At first, Italy still had private newspapers and independent journalists. But Mussolini slowly replaced freedom with control. Editors who opposed him were dismissed, newspapers were pressured through government subsidies, and journalists learned that survival meant loyalty. By the early 1930s, almost every newspaper echoed the same voice, the voice of the regime. The media called Mussolini Il Duce, the great leader, the father of the nation. No dissent, no debate, no diversity of thought. What Mussolini created was what he proudly called the national voice. It sounded patriotic, but it was actually the death of individuality. By the time that people realized they'd been deceived, their nation was already collapsing under fascist lies. Number 6, Turkey under Erdogan. Under President Recep Erdogan, the phrase national security became the ultimate excuse to silence opposition, control the press, and intimidate truth-tellers. After the failed coup attempt in 2016, Erdogan declared a state of emergency, giving his government sweeping powers. Thousands of journalists, academics, and citizens were arrested. Newspapers critical of the government were shut down. Television networks were taken over by pro-government owners. By 2018, Turkey had become the world's largest jailer of journalists. Reporters who questioned corruption or military policies were branded as terrorists or foreign agents. And the most chilling part, much of the censorship was sold to the public as protecting the nation. The government's message was clear. If you criticize us, you are attacking Turkey itself. Number 5, Cuba under Castro. After the Cuban Revolution of 1959, Fidel Castro promised freedom and equality for all. But behind the slogans of liberation lay a brutal reality. Silence anyone who disagreed. Writers who dared to criticize the government were arrested, exiled, or disappeared. Radio stations were nationalized, forcing the Cuban people to hear only what the government wanted them to hear. And it didn't stop at media control. Ordinary citizens were pressured to report dissent. Neighbors, co-workers, even family members became informants. Cuba became a society where speaking your mind could cost you your livelihood, your freedom, or your life. Art, literature, and intellectual thought were carefully monitored and censored. Books were banned, music was scrutinized, even casual conversations could trigger surveillance. By silencing opposition voices, Castro ensured that fear ruled over reason.
Number 4, North Korea. North Korea is often called the most secretive nation on earth, and for a good reason. Freedom of speech doesn't exist here. Not in words, not in thought, not in life itself. From the moment citizens wake up, they are bombarded with state-controlled messages. School books, newspapers, television, every piece of information glorifies the ruling Kim dynasty. And if anyone dares to question it, they disappear. Literally. Criticism of the government, even a whisper in your own home, can lead to imprisonment in brutal labor camps. Entire families are punished for the words or actions of one member. The population lives in a constant state of fear, where lying to survive is a daily necessity. During the 3 generations of Kims, the government controlled every story, every fact, every conversation. Propaganda doesn't just inform, it reshapes reality. People grow up believing that everything outside North Korea is evil, that starvation is a triumph of their leaders, and that dissent is a crime worse than death. Number 3. Franco's Spain. After the Spanish Civil War ended in 1939, General Francisco Franco took control of Spain. The country had been torn apart by political divisions, and Franco promised order, but at the devastating cost of losing freedom. Teachers, writers, and journalists who spoke out were arrested, exiled, or executed. Even regional languages like Catalan and Basque were suppressed. People couldn't express their culture or identity without risking punishment. All opposition parties were banned. Newspapers, radio stations, and books that criticized the regime were immediately shut down. Franco didn't just silence critics, he altered history books to glorify the regime. Media became propaganda machines, telling citizens what to think, not allowing them to question. Spain under Franco was a society where freedom of speech was a crime, and the government demanded absolute obedience. Number 2. The Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was built on the promise of equality, but behind the hammer and sickle lay one of the most oppressive regimes in history. Freedom of speech wasn't just limited, it was criminalized. Critics of the state, intellectuals, journalists, and even ordinary citizens were labeled enemies of the people. And the punishment? Harsh beyond imagination. Millions were sent to gulags, labor camps where survival was a daily battle against starvation, disease, and brutality. Entire families were torn apart. Children grew up in fear. Even casual conversations could lead to arrest, exile, or death. Everything from history and culture to science was manipulated to serve the ideology of the state. Truth became whatever the government declared it to be, and deviation from that truth was deadly. Names like Alexander Solzhenitsyn remind us of the human cost. His writings exposed the horrors of the Gulag, but each word he published carried enormous risk, and countless voices never survived to tell their story. The Soviet Union proves that when speech is banned, society doesn't just lose debate or ideas, it loses humanity itself. Number 1. Lessons for America. And finally, lesson number 10, the one that hits closest to home. America, now more than ever, is in danger of falling into authoritarianism. Today, we see tech companies deciding which voices deserve to be heard. We see politicians giving speech on the dangers of the so-called hate speech. Every person has to mind every word they say, not to insult other people's identity. We see people canceling each other based on the concept of identity politics. When the fear of words outweighs the value of truth, freedom is already slipping away. America was meant to be the last stand for free expression, not another cautionary tale in the history books. As citizens, as patriots, as human beings, we must stay alert. We must question, we must speak. We must never allow fear to replace freedom. If you believe freedom of speech is worth defending, hit that like button. It tells YouTube this message matters and helps more patriots see the truth. Subscribe to Top 10 Patriots and turn on notifications, because liberty isn't free and the truth needs a voice. Comment below, which historical lesson shocked you the most and why? Your voice is part of history. Don't let it be silenced.